And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Like I said before the break, we do want to divert briefly to some of these key international headlines. Take a look at this headline in the New York Post today. A CIA official with a top security clearance has been charged for leaking highly classified documents about Israel's plans to strike Iran. I'm reading from the report in the New York Times right now saying, quote, a CIA official has been charged with disclosing classified documents that appeared to show Israel's plans to retaliate against Iran for a missile attack earlier this year. That's according to court documents and people familiar with the matter. The official, Asif Rahman, was indicted last week in federal court in Virginia on 2 counts of willful retention and transmission of national defense information under the Espionage Act. He was arrested by the FBI on Tuesday in Cambodia and was set to appear in federal court in Guam on Thursday. The leak offered a glimpse into the depth of American concerns about Israel's plans and illustrated the extent to which the United States spies on even its closest allies here. Let's talk about this major arrest by federal officials here with our friend at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Behnam Ben Taleblu. He joins me. Behnam, good to see you here, and thanks for being with us on this story. You know, I guess I wanted to ask, because at the time, and we covered this leak extensively here on Live Now, you know, at the time, did we know essentially what the leaks purported to say about Israel's plans to strike Iran? What have we learned since? Were they a one-to-one match or not? Were they incongruous?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. It's an excellent question because the leaks, which many had outstanding questions about, meaning was this an act of a mole inside the U.S. government? Was this an act of an outside hacker group being able to get access to sensitive compartmentalized information? Or was this someone who wanted to willfully leak information that made its way briefly into the press simply out of a worldview that is fundamentally different, that which they signed up for to work in the U.S. national security bureaucracy. So we're still learning about the intention, but we're able to cut across the first 2 theses there, or invalidate them, I should say. And in essence, the individual you mentioned, Mr. Rahman, was believed to have leaked them onto a social media app, Telegram, and then from there it went out into the media space a little bit. We don't know yet if this individual had any ties with foreign intelligence services that would benefit from this kind of information, but chiefly the Iranians or also America's other great power competitors like Russia or China. But that which we know about the Israeli strike, the retaliatory strike, I should say, that did materialize on October 26th, is that it wasn't just about moving missiles around or the things that this intelligence had talked about, which came to the CIA by way of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, as well as by the National Security Agency. So likely satellite imagery and signals intelligence about what the Israelis may have been up to, changing their force posture, hardening things, moving things around. But given the fact that the Israeli strike came largely by way of a massive aerial attack with standoff weapons, likely air-launched ballistic missiles, it probably just shows that this individual saw a snapshot of what largely was probably an Israeli process getting ready for the strike rather than the exact plan itself.
Yeah, I just want to correct the record. I misspoke. October 1st was Iran's second direct attack against Israel. You briefly mentioned there. October 26th was Israel's response to that attack. So just wanted to correct that for the record here. That was my mistake. But, you know, I wanted to ask also, according to the New York Times, the information in the documents is highly classified, details, interpretations, like you said, of satellite imagery that shed light on a possible strike by Israel on Iran, including the type of missiles, planes, and other aircraft its military could use here. You know, if you're in the upper echelons at the CIA, what do you think is going through their minds tonight that one of their own was the leaker here? Do they have to clean house there? Israel is an ally. I mean, it's not, you know, some nefarious peer competitor.
Indeed, but the U.S. does have global coverage when it comes to its satellite intelligence capabilities, and reportedly, or at least that which came out of the Associated Press, this information was marked to actually be shared by what is traditionally called the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, meaning not just the U.S., but to be shared with the UK, to be shared with Canada, to be shared with Australia, and to be shared with New Zealand. So it was likely satellite imagery that was supposed to be shared with intel analysts that America wants to see the world through the same lens with. So they want a common picture of the threat or a common picture of developments that are going on in the region. Such things are not uncommon, but to the heart of your first question, it does raise significant counterintelligence questions, again, as to what this individual's motivations were, what their background was, what the intentionality here was, and ultimately, if God forbid, there are more people who may harbor such a disposition that could be turned on or turned off at a time of their own ideational choosing, or, God forbid, a foreign power's choosing.
So what do you make, though, of the charges, willful retention and transmission of national defense information under the Espionage Act? That seems to be de rigueur protocol for the DOJ in cases like this. And I can think of a few in recent memory for similar charges. Jack Teixeira, who was just sentenced to 15 years in prison yesterday for leaking classified intelligence on the Ukraine war online on his Discord group chat here. So similar in scope.
Similar in scope, but very interesting that this individual had left the country or fled the country. We're still trying to get more insight into why this individual was in Cambodia. Was he hiding? Was he being transited to a different jurisdiction? It's too soon to tell. But I think the really important element here is the ability to capture this individual, make the arrest, and bring them before a federal court. So all eyes will be on that court case in Guam, actually.
All right. So, Behnam, while we have you, I think it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about some of these picks that Donald Trump has made, especially when it comes to how a Trump foreign policy 2.0 might look like here. And I want to talk about some of the earlier picks that he made: National Security Advisor, Florida Congressman Michael Waltz, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, that pick there, Elise Stefanik at the United Nations, and former Governor Mike Huckabee to Israel as the U.S. ambassador here. Now, most, if not all of these, need to be Senate confirmed here. What is a Trump foreign policy shaping up to look like, especially when it comes to with regard to the Middle East and Israel in particular?
Israel, and one could even say with respect to the threat posed by the Islamic Republic of Iran. I mean, all these individuals that you mentioned have a stellar track record when it comes to being pro-Israel, and also a stellar track record when it comes to pushing back or supporting the term one architecture of sanctions the Trump administration imposed against the Islamic Republic and expanded over time, called maximum pressure. You know, you mentioned 2.0. Make no mistake that maximum pressure will be back under the auspices of max pressure 2.0, and will likely be significantly expanded, and will be expanded in no small part due to the vision from the Trump administration, as well as the implementation of that vision from some of the individuals you mentioned. You know, having someone with the pro-Israel credentials of Mike Huckabee in Israel is critical for hand-holding and messaging, particularly as we are well beyond the one-year anniversary of the multiple wars Israel is facing on its borders in the aftermath of the terrorist attack on October 7th. Someone like Elise Stefanik, who's literally tweeted and spoken about at length the need for maximum pressure, her advocacy at the United Nations in New York, particularly when snapback or when the restoration of UN sanctions, the ability to do that will expire in October of that year. That will be crucial. Someone like Marco Rubio, who's advocated tirelessly on behalf of the Iranian people, helping to draw in the minds of Americans the sharp divide between the regime in Iran, which is an adversary, and the people inside that country, which is a strong ally. He could be a strong voice there, and as a complement, and provide a complementary prong of maximum support for the Iranian people in a term 2 Trump administration to complement maximum pressure. And last but not least, you certainly have Mike Waltz. That's someone who we at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies were honored to have on staff a few years back. And he's led on these issues, whether on the security front or the human rights front, and getting most of these issues on the Middle East absolutely right, whether that's pushing back on the regime in Tehran and standing with the Iranian people, or helping make sure that Israel has everything it needs to defend itself.
So, Behnam, there is a strain within the Republican Party right now to, revert into the United States and be quite reserved when it comes to a muscular foreign policy. Some would call them isolationist. Do you see any strains of that right now in who Trump has chosen already? Some would cite Tulsi Gabbard's appointment as the director of national intelligence. Do you see it that way there at FDD? How is FDD taking the Gabbard announcement?
Well, there's no view on an institutional position yet on her announcement or any of the announcements, but I will tell you that the Republican Party is a changing party, and both in terms of demographics as well as in terms of foreign policy and domestic policy. And thus far, some of the names that we're seeing, whether they're for internal positions or external facing positions, we should say, represent the broad tent, both in terms of the internationalist as well as in terms of the isolationist positions that exist within that party. Now, I'll tell you personally that some of the names that we mentioned earlier, whether that's someone like Marco Rubio, whether that's someone like Mike Waltz, those are very reassuring for some of us who, I wouldn't say support just a muscular foreign policy, but support peace through strength. And really that kind of through line through many of the individuals that we mentioned of supporting peace through strength, of looking through successful examples of deterrence against America's adversaries and standing with American partners that we saw so successfully in term one of the Trump administration, indeed offer us the ability to have some hope that they'll be continued and expanded.
Behnam, also, let's just talk about the state of the Israel-Hamas-Hezbollah war, if you will, and how Benjamin Netanyahu is now navigating the political waters here in the United States with the upcoming Trump administration here. Do you anticipate any major movements on that front with regard to the war, a possible ceasefire, bringing all of the hostages back home? Hostage families visited the White House yet again today.
Certainly the hostage issue is at the forefront, as is the humanitarian issue for the Biden administration, which has now entered its lame duck period. There certainly are concerns as if the lame duck period of the Biden administration will emulate some of the, shall we say, not so helpful things that we saw at the end of term two Obama during the Obama administration from November to January 2015 to 2016 to 2017 on the way out. So there are some potential concerns there. But as to the multi-front wars that Israel is indeed facing, there are still outsized concerns over the future of Gaza. There's the continued Israeli military successes against Lebanese Hezbollah, but there is still the fighting of Lebanese Hezbollah, the rocket fire of Lebanese Hezbollah, the inability to bring the residents of the north back yet. And those are things that a term two Trump administration is going to have to deal with based on the military successes or setbacks of its major partner in the region, Israel.
And of course, we have that live look now in Beirut. It looks like smoke is emanating from some type of neighborhood there. Not entirely sure if that's the result of some Israeli action there in Beirut. We know they've been quite active there in the Beirut suburbs. As always, Behnam Ben Taleblu with the FDD. Can't thank you enough. We'll talk soon.